Our next presentation deals with the business value of trade promotion management. Our presenter is Joel Cartwright, Director of Product Development, TPM at AFS Technologies. Joel, take it away.
Thanks, John. I appreciate the time today. Thank you very much. So as John mentioned, I'm head of our product development for AFS Technologies, specifically our retail applications. I've been in the consumer packaged goods industries for more years than I care to mention, with companies like Sara Lee Foods, Sunny Delight, Kimberly-Clark. I went over to the solution side several years ago and been in the space on the software as a service for consumer packaged goods for a long time. So thank you. Appreciate the time to connect with you today. So just real quick on the agenda. So when I'm asked to put together the presentation, a lot of it has to do with analytics and so forth, but I thought more oftentimes than not, when our customers have come to me and ask me, what's the latest thing and the latest gadgets and so forth, the functionality coming down the market, I always say, well, you have these nice things and these fancy gadgets and fancy analytics and so forth, but are you really going back to basics? And that's really what the presentation is all about, is back to basics, making sure that you're doing the standard blocking and tackling of managing a trade budget. Within the agenda of the presentation, I want to define how to assess the value, defining if you're getting everything out of a solution when managing trade. So identifying the value assessment, be it quantity or quality. Understanding the assessment details, specific functionality or maybe something else that could be coming down the pipe. But more oftentimes than not, it's focusing on what you should be doing currently with either your business process or a tool that you're utilizing. So the overall objective is to define the business value, provide you some insight on the business value gap with a TPM application or Excel should be providing. Some analysis points for you to take back to your organization and typical usage of TPM or Excel. How should I be analyzing? How should I be managing a budget or managing people? Provide you some key insights on other application users and how they've identified areas of value. So let's first off by defining what the value gap is. So when looking at defining a value out of software, out of a business process, when you're looking to make a change, the first thing you want to evaluate is the value a quantity? Am I saving time? Am I saving money? So quantity, what time am I saving? What's the specific return on investment as it relates to time? Can it be assigned or identified in a process change or a usage change? When managing trade spending, you never give back money. You just really redeploy the spending. So it's analyzing how I'm using something or how I'm doing something or how I'm managing something to say, can I do that better? The second component is quality. Is there a quality return on investment? Am I getting the work out of it? Is the business process working? Is the improvement there, change that needs to be done? Is it managing spending? Is it providing a process efficiency? And the quality format is a way for you to identify opportunities to then translate into point one. Here's a business process. The quality is not good. If I change it, what's the dollar value that I will get out of that change? So there's three areas as far as when managing a business, a trade marketing plan that you want to evaluate. And the first really starts with the assessment details that relates to creating a promotion or event or an annual plan. You talk about the sales and revenue lift. What can I do? And when I talk about the value gap, we always focus on how we can do a net sales increase. So evaluating a process, how I can increase my net sales. As I talked about in the prior slide, I'm not going to give money back to the organization. I'm going to redeploy that more efficiency. So taking a look at
Joel, we have a question come in, Joel, real quick here. Do your clients manage your clients manage their entire S&OP process within your applications?
They do. That's a great question. They do. They put the entire top-down plan into the application. They assign the top-down plan then to strategic customer points for them to then develop a bottom-up plan to align to the S&OP or the sales objective. The S&OP process includes a sales target or objective, but also a budget that they have to deliver in order to hit the contribution margin they want to do. So yes, it's a sales, and customers are managing that through our applications.
Okay, now another question. How far in advance are your clients planning in the tool? Quarterly, yearly, or somewhere in between?
Most of it depends on the category that they're involved in, as well as the retailers. But typically, they start with the entire plan. Put the entire plan in. Some do, put second half, first half, and plan only out 6 months. But it's really based upon their business specifically. Is it a high turn business? Do plans change? Is it very commodity driven to where price points may need to change? So we need to change the whole overall S&OP process? But essentially it's somewhere in between. It's kind of all over the board. But most like to see the full year plan in the tool to see and project how they're going to end up for the year.
Okay, that's all the questions we had at this time, Joel.
Good stuff. Good questions. So what I talked about is the evaluating the hierarchy and evaluating how you do your planning and your analysis. So looking at your customer structure. How do you do your planning? Do you look at planning from a hierarchy standpoint of Kroger corporate, or do I look at it from a specific sales entity? So evaluating how you do your planning. Then taking a look at how you manage the indirect business. A lot of our clients, a large majority of our clients, all of their business is done through indirect customers. So evaluating the process of how am I managing that indirect spend? My accruals are going to based on the cases I've sold to a distributor, but I need to understand and make sure I understand how that indirect spending relates back to the direct ship customers. Am I putting the dollars spent back to where I'm accruing the money? One of the big things that we talked a little bit about in the question is, are customers managing the entire S&OP process within the tool? Yes, they are. Some of them lose sight of it, though. When assigning an S&OP target, some of our customers in time may drop loading a sales objective to a specific customer group, which aligns to the top-down plan. If you're not assigning a sales objective to say, okay, Kroger, here's your piece of the overall operating plan target, and you're not managing to that, there's no accountability. So when customers say, how can I get more out of my system? The first thing I ask is, are you assigning a sales objective? Are you assigning a target? Are you assigning accountability? Same goes from a budget. Everybody can drive revenue with spending like crazy, but you have to assign a budget as well. Budget being in a promoted pricing group, a fixed budget, a rate, percentage of price, but something aligned with the P&L to align that objective to the top-down plan. So what you want to do is to take advantage of how an application or the way you look at your process. Look at multiple event levels by reducing the data input. So if you have the ability to plan at multiple levels, that gives the opportunity to kind of use a manage by exception tool. So when you're evaluating your sales and revenue lift, how can I get a net sales increase? Take a look at how you're managing the plans. Can I manage it at higher levels? Can I manage it more of a all other type of philosophy? Load a sales objective. I just mentioned, let's put a sales objective into Excel or in some sort of application to give you a target that you can drive to. This will help you identify gaps in the plan. Loading a budget will help you manage the contribution effects or the impact of what trade will be. And then make sure you're managing the indirect and the direct ship accruals, making sure you're aligning those two together. But more importantly, see how the direct ship forecast aligns to an indirect ship forecast. Are those two numbers aligning together? So what's the gap fill? What's the recommendations? What will it drive? Taking advantage of a multi-level type of planning, kind of a 80-20 rule, will help you identify gaps and opportunities that you can act on faster. Prior to the planogram review, you can get out in front of it quicker by saying, here's a gap. How can I fill that gap? Or, hey, here's an opportunity. I can redeploy trade. Loading the sales objectives help you find where there is a gap to a plan. Is it by customer? Is it by product? Something like that. A budget target helps flush out any hidden trade dollars or inaccurate spending. By having the budget, you can see, all right, here's how much I've deployed. Here's how much I'm spending. Here's what I'm getting. More importantly, when you have a budget, maybe if you need help managing your brokers, by giving them a budget, it helps them manage and may even pay broker commissions based upon a net pricing. From an accounting standpoint, for the indirect spend and indirect forecast, the indirect spend helps with accrual accuracy, and indirect forecast helps with your forecast accuracy, which goes downstream for demand planning, sales planning, and helping gaps in production fills, as well as taking advantage of opportunities for production efficiencies. So these are the value fills. These are recommendations that you can take advantage of. Typically what we see with those from a planning standpoint, our customers who employ these type of tactics typically see a 1% increase in net sales. So nothing fancy, no powerful calculation or no some sort of analytics tool. It's essentially aligning targets to customers, budgets to plans, and holding accountability. So a 1% increase in net sales, but not putting forth too terribly much effort, other than having accountability. So the value gap assessment is the next component of the value gap assessment. It's really the accrual process. So from an accrual process standpoint, looking at it from an accounting perspective, is we're looking at cost reduction. That helps with an increase in net sales. An accrual entry from TPM. And what I'm talking about is a lot of customers who we deal with, when they're first introduced to an application or they're utilizing Excel, they're booking an arbitrary number. This is what I spent last year, so I think I'm just going to book that this year. So it doesn't allow for any fluctuations or opportunities which you could take spending and have it redeployed. In order to set aside or accrue some utilizing the committed spending that's within a tool. And how to address these is to create a sales and forecast spend accuracy metric. Okay, this is what I'm forecasting to spend, or this is what I'm forecasting to sell, and compare that back to what you actually did, and set up a goal to say, this is how I want to be from an organization standpoint. The second big component is making sure all the promotional activity is captured somewhere. Best suited, captured in an application. But make sure you have a true vision as everything that's going on within the software, within the plan. Get a good bit of feedback there. Changes to committed or closed promotions. So committed events and committed allowances and tactics, either Excel or from an accounting standpoint, these are money I'm just holding out there waiting for the customer to do something. Making sure that those numbers or the liability is true. So the main thing is to deploy your P&L trade accrual to drive sales. Don't hold money back. Let's deploy it. Let's use it to drive sales. That's what it's there for. So if I've set aside $2.35, don't hold back. Let's fully deploy it. Provide the account managers the confidence to deploy a rate and not have to worry about a potential overspend.
Okay, a couple of questions have come in, Joel, here that perhaps you'd like to address. One, do you see clients holding brokers accountable for objectives and budgets?
Not as much as we should. Not as much as we should. Absolutely. Clients are struggling with paying commissions off of top-line sales. What they're looking for, what they're trying to get to, is the ability to pay broker commissions off of net sales. And they struggle with coming up with that number, because they haven't assigned the full P&L within a tool or have accountability down to a broker-managed customer level. So they want to get there, but they're struggling to do that.
Okay, here's another broker question that came in. Do you see clients shifting the way they pay brokers?
As I think I mentioned, they want to shift. They want to shift the way that they pay brokers to be more of a contribution-driven type of commission structure, rather than just dumping trade and driving volume on top line. To be more efficient, to say, all right, instead of paying you on margin, or instead of paying you on top line sales, I want to pay you on margin. This way, it will help them deploy a more efficient plan and provide better insight on how trade spend is going. So yes, I'm starting to see a shift on the larger scale customers who brokers are representing. But as I mentioned, some of them are still reluctant or don't have the capacity to make that shift.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So the gap fill recommendations, I talked about an accuracy metric. One of the things we talk about with new opportunities or customers who come to us for advice, how do I improve it? We say, well, let's put together some sort of a target. An analysis metric target is you want to be within like plus or minus 1%. So what you're forecasting for sales and what you're forecasting for spending and what actually comes in should be within that plus or minus 5%. As customers evolve and get better at it, that number should improve. But it's a target that the organization can look at and say, okay, that's where we want to be. That's what it will drive. All promotional activity captured somewhere in the application or in Excel, or better suited within an application, because this provides an overall plan of the entire organization. So that way everything is out in the open, everything is visible by customer. More importantly, everything is rolled up. Unless the plan is captured somewhere, it's basically an illusion. We don't know. It's unplanned spending. We don't know where the dollars are going. Making sure that the spend liability is up to date, making sure that we know this is what the customer is owed to, we owe the customer or owe to the retailer. Make sure that accrual liability is accurate. And all spending is deployed. There's no need to hold money back when there's good accountability and good controls in place. Let's deploy the spending. That's what it's there for. We're not going to gain anything by dropping that extra $10,000 or $12,000 to the bottom line, or extra $112,000 to the bottom line. Let's redeploy it and drive revenue, profitable revenue.
Okay, a few questions before you move on, Joel.
Sure.
One, do you see your customers holding account managers to contribution or to top-line sales?
Typically, we see our account managers were more of a top-line sales, but we are seeing a shift for account managers. And these are employees of the manufacturer to say your commission structure, your bonus structure is now being moved to more of a contribution margin perspective. So yes, we are seeing more of that, and that number is increasing. And typically, we're seeing that customers who've been on a tool for a while, and they're being pressed to squeeze somewhere from the supply chain or somewhere down to where that needs to become a priority within the organization.
Okay, and one more question. Do you see your customers using the TPM tool for demand planning?
That's an interesting question. We're starting to see that surface more with opportunities and with current clients. Clients who are a smaller size, maybe in the $100 million, $50 million or less, who may not have a demand tool, are needing something to feed into an inventory, a load planning, production planning schedule. What we're seeing, though, with larger scale clients, because the trade plan is becoming more visible, we're seeing clients taking a forecast export or something out of the trade tool to do a comparative of what demand is telling them, to potentially call out incremental activities that may not be encased within the demand plan. So what is the thing that's not in the demand plan that's in the TPM tool that's truly incremental, say, to prior year? Did we get a Walmart COMAC that could really move the needle in our demand plan that's not captured? So it's kind of a litmus test between the two.
Okay, that's all the questions up to now.
Okay. So we talk about what does this get for me? What's the quality value on this quantity? Excuse me. What's the quantity value on this quality process change? We typically see customers who do these slight and simple changes to make sure accountability is structured. About a 5% increase in net sales year over year. Each year, we'll see that 5% increase in net sales. So simple things to make the business value work with little or no investment. Just basic accountability within the organization. The last component within the value guest assessment is really the settlement process. We talked about the first value gap is essentially the planning, so pre-planning. What's it going to look like from that perspective? The middle of the plan is that accrual, the deployment, the execution. How's it going? And then the last one is really the settlement process, which is, of course, the big amalgam within consumer packaged goods industry is how can I get better at paying my retailer to streamline that process? Settlement processing needs to be streamlined. By streamlining the process and not overcomplicated it, you want to shift the focus to get more to a root cause analysis. And I'm not talking just trade analysis and post-event analysis. I'm talking about overall customer management, where I can identify where there are invalids maybe for that should have been taken for damaged goods or products, so non-trade activity. So by streamlining and optimizing the settlement processing, it'll shift the work that's typically done to just a clicking and dragging or basic reconciliation to do more of a root cause analysis. Improving the settlement workflow within an application or somewhere within the organization. A lot of organizations have multiple departments, so we have to make sure that if there's a required bill of lading or proof of performance or something like that, can be streamlined the process to make sure that all settlement components are met. Most importantly is reviewing when a settlement comes in against the agreed upon contract. More oftentimes than not, the invalids are coming through where retailers are taking advantage because what they agreed upon with the account manager is not what the purchasing department or the purchase order folks or accounts payable have done at a retailer have captured correctly. So making sure that you're gathering the most accurate data possible. So recommendations is make sure that the contracts are up to date. Make sure they're accessible to when the settlements come in. Making sure that those contracts match the customer deal sheets. What we planned is what they actually came through with in the back end. Making sure that the executed contracts, the event dates, are leaked. Make sure that they're not buying outside of an off-invoice window. You're going to get definitely forward buy. You're going to get everything that relates to forward buy taking advantage of a process. But seeing if there's a way to streamline that or making sure they're not taking advantage post-event activity. Making sure that the documentation, as I mentioned, is accessible by the settlement folks so they can compare those contracts back. Because invalids, mind you, are tough to reclaim, but if you have the particular documentation, you can get that money back in either cash or additional marketing event planning and event capabilities at a retailer. So if you owe you $10,000 in event activity, maybe they'll give you some free marketing. So what's our recommendation? Our recommendations to fill this gap. Gather the most accurate data possible, as I mentioned, based on the recommendations. Promotion entry data aligning to what the retailer is saying. You've gone in with the account manager, making sure that what's agreed upon with the retailer is what's in the system or what's accountable. Make sure those deals, what's met in those deals, make sure that they match the deal sheets. Make sure that that information can be streamlined through the back-end settlements process. Ensuring that all the contracts and deal sheets are attached or kept somewhere in a singular source. This creates a good audit trail for deal deduction, authentication, and liability, making sure that the deals are accurate, as I mentioned, to what's coming in from a settlement standpoint. Some basic things, basic recommendations that may or may not be done because maybe the process has been overcomplicated or not addressed at all. So what's the big picture? So when you look at annual planning, when you look at the accrual accuracy and how the promotion or plan is executing, when you look at the settlement process and you factor all these changes together, what's the overall impact to the big picture? Typically by utilizing these capabilities of the value gap fills that currently are done, our clients have seen, or clients can see, or typically customer can see, a 2 to 3% increase in net sales with little investment, with just holding accountability and structuring business processes to make sure that they're aligned, they're efficient, and they're working. Make sure the accountability rolls back to the sales plan. These are simple things that can be done year over year to increase net sales. Again, we're not redeploying or we're not dropping money to the bottom line. We're redeploying those funds to drive top-line sales. So this is what I would recommend. Take a look at the presentation and go through the different areas that I described. These are described at a very high level. Maybe segment your process over those three key components: planning, execution, settlement. Evaluate the areas where there's inefficiencies by basically saying, all right, here's what we don't hold accountability. If we did, this is what we could see. So going back and looking at your organization, there's the three key areas and say, is there accountability? Is there streamlined process? Is it transparent? Can I identify a quality capability on process improvement and translate that into a quantity, i.e. the 2 to 3% net sales increase within the organization? I think what you'll find is that the benchmark can be measurable and can be compared against the current revenue. Once you've identified at least one of these reference gaps, you can then insert a business process plan change and identify what the ROI will be based upon what that plan change would do. Put together a reasonable proof of concept or a reasonable timeline to get the process change. Change management is one of the biggest things we have to deal with as a software provider. Change management within the company, within an organization. If you do this, your company could and will improve, and you can be a big win when that takes place. Any questions? Again, not a fancy presentation with a lot of slides and a lot of graphs. It's just basic blocking and tackling that a lot of clients, I feel, or a lot of folks lose sight of when they're managing a plan, managing the second largest budget on your P&L.
Here's a basic question, Joel, that came in. What is the biggest misconception about TPM by manufacturers and by retailers?
The basic misconception I've found is that TPM is just a basic repository to put plans and deals in the system. It's not a resource to where you can say, all right, how can this impact me financially? But the basic misconception is just a place of additional work that I have to do so my boss can see how my plan is evolving, how my plan is moving. The second misconception is that it can't be aligned back to the retailer. Retailers are looking for more collaborative capabilities to help align events and event plans for the year back to TPM, back to an overall manufacturer's plan. So the two biggest misconceptions I feel are it's just a repository for events, I'm not responsible or accountable for anything, and the retailer doesn't care what I have to execute from my plan. So not aligning the two.
Okay, one more question. Which manufacturers are best in class for TPM programs?
Typical manufacturers are the ones who, honestly, are a little bit smaller. They are in multiple categories, but their organizations essentially are built around either an application, which is maybe best in class, but the ones that best suited are ones who are evaluating these processes constantly, and they're not looking for a software simple button. They're looking for a way to evaluate a current process to make sure it's going right. Number two, they're reaching out to other manufacturers or peers to say, this is how I do this business process. Are you doing the same? So essentially, I think the ones who are best in class are the ones that don't become stagnant. They're always looking for ways to improve a process and improve a capability.
Okay, well, that's all the questions we have. If the attendees would like to follow up with Joel, you can certainly email him. His contact information is on the screen. Also, his phone number is there, too, if you're taking phone calls, Joel, and he can follow up and explain further some of the fundamentals he outlined so well during his presentation, or you can ask him even more complex questions. I'm sure he'll be able to answer those as well. So thank you, Joel. I appreciate it. Good job.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate everyone else's time. Thank you very much.